The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Kryn Empire surrendered after just 18 days of war. 18 days. An empire that had stood for centuries, destroyed in less than 3 weeks. But the shock came from what happened next. Everyone expected humanity to destroy the Kryn homeworld. That was what species did when they won total victory. You eliminated the threat permanently. Fleet Admiral Sang-Woo Yoon sat in his command chair, looking at the tactical display of the Kryn homeworld. His fleet surrounded the planet. One command and he could turn the entire world into ash. Every military leader in the Kryn Empire was on that world. Every government official who had ordered the attack on human colonies. Admiral, his weapons officer said quietly, "Targeting solutions are ready. We await your command." Sang-Woo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that no one expected. "Stand down weapons. Begin reconstruction protocol." His bridge crew stared at him. His weapons officer blinked in confusion. "Sir, did you say reconstruction?" "You heard correctly. Contact Earth Command. Tell them to send humanitarian aid ships, medical teams, and civil engineers. We are going to rebuild what we destroyed." Within hours, human ships were landing on Kryn worlds, but they were not carrying soldiers. They carried food, medicine, and construction equipment. The Kryn people watched in confusion as their conquerors began repairing infrastructure and treating wounded. The terms of surrender were harsh but survivable. The Kryn military would be completely dismantled. All weapons technology would be turned over to a Galactic Council Oversight Committee. War crimes trials would be held for those who ordered the attack on human colonies. Reparations would be paid over the next century, but the Kryn species would survive. Their culture would continue. Their worlds would remain theirs. Humans had no interest in conquest. In a courtroom on Council Prime, Warlord Thraknor stood trial. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Battle recordings, intercepted communications, testimony from his own officers. He had ordered the unprovoked attack on human colonies. He had authorized the use of banned weapons. He had executed prisoners. Dr. Sujin. Han testified about the orbital bombardment of New Busan. Bora. Shin described watching her friends executed on Juno 7. Captain Taeyang showed evidence of torture and mistreatment of human prisoners. The verdict was never in doubt. Thraknor was found guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment, but something unexpected happened during the trial. A Kryn soldier named Kelvar testified. He had been one of the soldiers who executed civilians on Juno 7. He described his actions in detail, his voice shaking with shame. "I was told humans were enemies of the Empire," Kelvar said. "I was told they were dangerous and would kill us if given the chance. I believed my commanders. When I was captured, I expected torture and execution. Instead, a human doctor treated my wounds. She saved my life. I realized everything I had been told was a lie." Bora Shin was in the courtroom. She had lost friends to soldiers like Kelvar. When he finished his testimony, she stood up. "I forgive you," she said. The courtroom went silent. Kelvar stared at her in disbelief. "I forgive you," Bora repeated. "You were following orders. You believed lies. What you did was terrible, but you have shown remorse. You have told the truth. That matters. It was not justice in the traditional sense, but it was mercy. And mercy, the galaxy was learning, was humanity's most dangerous weapon." Ambassador Nari addressed the Galactic Council 3 weeks after the war ended. Representatives from every species filled the chamber. The Kryn seat was empty, their empire in shambles. "For 200 years, Nari began, humanity has pursued peace. We have shared our technology. We have negotiated instead of conquered. We have asked for cooperation, not submission. Many of you wondered why. Some thought we were weak. Others thought we were foolish. You were all wrong." She activated a holographic display. It showed the Prometheus weapons arsenal. Graviton disruptors, reality warpers, quantum erasers, biological weapons that could end entire species. All of it carefully stored and maintained for centuries. "We have always possessed overwhelming military capability," Nari continued. "The ancient civilizations that attacked our ancestors did not fall to primitive humans. They fell to humans who were holding back. We are still holding back. But now you know we can stop at any time." She let that sink in. The chamber was absolutely silent. 3,000 years ago, the Talshek Dominion enslaved our colonists. We destroyed their empire. 8,000 years ago, the Corvani Collective tried to take our world. They ceased to exist. 12,000 years ago, the Drath Empire came for our ancestors with spears and stone tools. The Drath never returned home. Nari looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each ambassador. The pattern is clear. Every species that provokes humanity eventually falls, not because we seek conquest, but because we ensure the threat is eliminated. We do not fight to win. We fight to make sure we never have to fight again. We could rule this galaxy with weapons that make reality itself obey our commands. We choose not to. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. Counselor Vex Thran stood. The ancient alien looked tired. Ambassador Choi speaks the truth. I have studied the historical records. 3 empires fell after attacking humanity. The Kryn Empire nearly became the 4th. The question the Council must ask is, why does humanity show mercy after demonstrating such power? Because power without restraint is tyranny, Nari answered. Because peace is more valuable than conquest. Because we remember what it was like to be hunted and threatened. We will defend ourselves without hesitation, but we will not become what we fought against. That is the difference between us and the species we have defeated. They saw strength as domination. We see strength as choice. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to update humanity's file in the Great Archive. The new entry would stand as a warning for all future generations. Captain Tai Yang retired from military service 6 months after the war. He had seen enough combat for one lifetime. He accepted a position as an ambassador, working to rebuild relationships with former Kryn territories. It was harder than fighting in many ways, but it mattered. His sister Jihai chose to stay in the military. Someone had to remember. Someone had to be ready. Colonel Minho and his Ghost Corps returned to the shadows. Officially, they had never deployed. Unofficially, 12 Kryn military installations would never forget the humans who appeared like ghosts, struck like lightning and vanished without a trace. Dr. Unisong sealed the Prometheus weapons back into their vaults. She updated the maintenance schedules and verified the security protocols. The weapons would sleep again. Hopefully for another 2 centuries. Hopefully forever. But they would be ready, just in case. Yoonji Park became the head of the Human Kryn Joint Reconciliation Committee. She worked with former enemies to rebuild trust and understanding. It was slow work. Many humans could not forgive. Many Kryn could not forget. But Yoonji believed it was possible. She had to believe it. Dr. Sujin Han returned to New Busan. The colony was being rebuilt. It would take years to restore what was lost. But humans were good at rebuilding. They had practice. In the Great Archive, Counselor Vex Thran stood before the updated entry on humanity. He read the new warning that would be preserved for future generations. Species, humanity. Warning confirmed. After 200 years of peaceful coexistence, the Kryn Empire launched an unprovoked military assault on human colonies. Human response was immediate and overwhelming. Kryn military capacity was reduced by 97% in 18 days. Kryn Empire forced to surrender unconditionally. Human casualties minimal. Kryn casualties catastrophic. The entry continued. Critical observation. Humanity terminated conflict voluntarily and initiated reconstruction efforts. They possess capability for complete planetary annihilation, but chose restoration instead. This makes them more dangerous, not less. Their greatest weapon is not technology, but restraint. They fight only when provoked. But when provoked, they fight to ensure it never happens again. The final section read, Updated recommendations for all species. Do not provoke humanity. Do not threaten their colonies. Do not assume their diplomatic nature indicates weakness. They choose peace from a position of overwhelming strength. Humanity remembers what you do. They forgive when possible, but they never forget, and they remain ready. Vexathron added his own note at the bottom. I have lived for 400 years and studied the history of thousands of species. Humanity is unique. They could rule this galaxy through force. They could conquer and dominate. They have the power. But they choose cooperation. They choose peace. This choice is what makes them truly dangerous. An enemy you can predict is manageable. An enemy who chooses mercy even when they could choose annihilation is unpredictable. And unpredictable threats are the ones that survive. On Earth, deep in a classified facility, Dr. Yuna Song placed the final seal on the Prometheus vault. On the massive door, inscribed in every written language in the galaxy, were simple words. Humanity chooses peace. Choose wisely. She turned off the lights and left. The weapons slept in the darkness, waiting, patient. The galaxy continued turning. Trade resumed. Diplomacy continued. The Kryn slowly rebuilt their civilization under careful oversight. Human colonies expanded. Peace returned. They watched humanity prepare for war and knew the stars would burn part. 2. The truth came slowly, like water seeping through a crack. 3 days after first contact, Ambassador Nayun sat across from High Chancellor Morthen in a secure conference room on the lunar station. Between them floated holographic displays showing what the Assembly called recent galactic events. Nayun had spent enough years in diplomacy to recognize carefully chosen words when she heard them. The Dravok are an expansionist species, Morthen explained, his forearms gesturing at images of insectoid creatures that moved in perfect synchronization. They've occupied some border territories. The Assembly requests assistance in peacekeeping operations. Dr. Jihai, sitting beside Nayun, studied the images with professional interest. The Dravok moved like a single organism, thousands of individuals acting as one, a hive mind. She had theorized about such species but never imagined she would see one. How many border territories? Nayun asked. 3 systems. Minimal casualties. Morthen's translator made his voice sound calm, but his body language told a different story. His hands kept moving, a nervous gesture. Commander Tae Sung, standing behind Nayun, cleared his throat. We detected combat radiation on your ships. The pattern suggests sustained engagement, not border skirmishes. How long have you been fighting the Dravok? The room went silent. Morthen's hands finally stopped moving. He looked at the humans for a long moment, and something changed in his expression. The diplomatic mask slipped. 2 years, he said quietly. We've been fighting for 2 years. They've taken 3 worlds completely. 12 billion dead. Our defense fleets can't stop them. Nayun leaned back in her chair. There it was. The truth. Why can't your fleet stop them? Because, Morthen said, and now his voice carried something humans recognized immediately. Shame. Because we don't know how to fight a real war. Over the next week, the Assembly opened their military records to human analysis. What Commander Tae Sung's team discovered shocked them, though not in the way the Assembly expected. Captain Wu Jin, who had served in the Pacific Unification War, laughed when he first reviewed the Assembly's battle tactics. It wasn't a cruel laugh, just surprised. Sir, they're not fighting, Wu Jin reported to Tae Sung. They're barely skirmishing. Their weapons are designed to disable, not destroy. Their tactics prioritize minimizing casualties on both sides. They have rules of engagement that... He paused, searching for words. That assumed the enemy will follow the same rules. Tae Sung studied the battle recordings. He watched assembly ships carefully maneuvering to avoid civilian areas, holding fire when enemies retreated, sending medical aid to disabled vessels. It was civilized. It was honorable. It was completely ineffective against an enemy that didn't care about rules. They've spent 10,000 years evolving beyond war, Dr. Jihai said, reading through the Assembly's military history. Their last major conflict was 8,000 years ago. Since then, all their disputes have been resolved through arbitration or limited police actions. They've deliberately kept their military technology restrained. Engineer Mi Sun, a 29-year-old weapons designer, examined the Assembly's ship specifications. Their vessels were marvels of technology, centuries ahead of human engineering in propulsion, energy systems, and life support. But their weapons were pathetic by human standards. Their most powerful weapon is what we'd call a medium-range disabling beam. Mi Sun explained to the Coalition High Command. It overloads enemy shields and damages propulsion. It almost never kills. Meanwhile, we have kinetic weapons that can punch through a mountain. Could we upgrade their weapons? Asked an admiral. Mi Sun shook her head. It's not about capability. They have the technology to build devastating weapons. They choose not to. It's philosophical. The philosophical crisis became clear when Counselor Kelthar visited Earth to coordinate with the Coalition military. He was a Neruvian, tall and thin with translucent skin that showed the bioluminescent patterns beneath. He had commanded the Assembly Defense Forces for 30 years and fought in a dozen conflicts. He had never killed anyone. We disable their ships and offer terms, Kelthar explained to a room full of human military officers. When they refuse, we maintain containment until they agree to arbitration. It's how civilized species resolve disputes. Captain Wu Jin raised his hand. What if they never agree to arbitration? That's never happened before. It's happening now, Wu Jin said. The Dravok don't care about your rules because they never agreed to follow them. You're losing because you're fighting a total war with police tactics. Kelthar's bioluminescent patterns flickered with distress. What do you suggest? That we become like them? That we abandon 10,000 years of evolved thought and return to barbarism? The room went quiet. Finally, Commander Tae-sung spoke. You don't have to become like them. That's why you asked us for help. We never stopped being barbarians. We just got very good at it. Meanwhile, Dr. Ji-hai made a discovery that changed everything. She had been studying the Dravok biology from the samples the assembly provided. The hive mind structure was fascinating and terrifying. Individual Dravok had minimal independent thought. They received orders through biological quantum entanglement from central nodes. Cut off from the nodes, individual Dravok became confused and non-functional. They're winning because they act as one, Ji-hai reported. Perfect coordination, no communication delays, no dissent or doubt. But that's also their weakness. Disrupt the nodes and the entire swarm collapses. The assembly won't target the nodes, said Tae-sung. Why not? Because the nodes are living creatures. Killing them would be mass murder by assembly standards. Ji-hai stared at him. But the Dravok have killed billions. That's war. Active combat. The assembly can accept defensive killing. But targeted assassination of command structures? They consider that a war crime. Ji-hai set down her datapad. Then they're going to lose. And we're going to have to win for them using methods they'll hate us for. Ambassador Nayun spent those weeks negotiating humanity's formal entry into the galactic community. The assembly was desperate enough to agree to almost anything. Full technology transfer, equal voting rights, complete operational autonomy for human military forces. The Assembly Council approved everything with minimal debate. Observer Vralix, now assigned to human liaison duties, watched the negotiations with growing dread. The humans were getting everything they asked for, and they were asking for the tools to wage war at a galactic scale. He filed report after report to the Assembly Council, warning them that they were creating something dangerous. The humans are not like us, he wrote. They unified their world not through peace but through exhaustion, after nearly destroying themselves. Their entire civilization is built on the memory of conflict. They study war the way we study art. They prepare for violence the way we prepare for celebration. We are inviting a predator species into the galactic community because we need predators to fight our battle. I fear what happens after the battle is won. His reports were acknowledged and filed. The Assembly had bigger concerns. On Earth, the coalition government held a secret session of the High Command. Commander Tae-sung presented Operation Firebreak, humanity's strategy for the Dravok conflict. The plan was brutal, efficient, and designed to end the war permanently. The Assembly wants us to reinforce their defensive positions, Tae-sung explained. We're not going to do that. Defense is how they've been losing. We're going to take the offensive. Admiral Han Sol, a 51-year-old veteran with hard eyes and gray hair, studied the operational maps. You're planning to bypass their defensive lines entirely and strike directly at Dravok-occupied space. Yes, sir. We're going to hit them where it hurts. Their supply lines, their communication nodes, their occupied worlds. We're going to make them defend everything at once. Casualties? Asked another admiral. On our side? Acceptable. On their side? Tae-sung paused. Total. The room absorbed this. These were professional military officers who had fought in Earth's unification wars. They knew what total war meant. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for humans to practice it. The Assembly will condemn our methods, said one general. Let them, replied Admiral Han Sol. They asked for our help. They don't get to choose how we provide it. Ambassador Nayun, present at the meeting, spoke up. We need to be very clear about what we're doing. We're not just winning a war for the Assembly. We're announcing humanity's presence on the galactic stage. Every species out there will judge us by how we fight this war. Then they'll learn that humans don't lose, said Admiral Han Sol. The final meeting between human and Assembly leadership happened on Assembly Central Station. High Chancellor Moore then presented the formal alliance agreement. Ambassador Nayun signed for humanity. The documents were sealed with both human and Assembly authentication. Afterward, Moore then spoke privately with Nayun. I need to ask, are your people truly willing to do what's necessary? Nayun met his eyes. Chancellor, Humanity spent thousands of years fighting each other. We nearly went extinct a dozen times. We know what war costs. We also know what losing costs. The Dravok are threatening your civilization. We'll stop them. And after? More than asked. After the Dravok are defeated? What then? They watched humanity prepare for war and knew the stars would burn Part 3. The galaxy watched with growing unease as humanity transformed itself into something the Assembly had never imagined. What should have taken years happened in months. Earth didn't just mobilize for war, it became war. Engineer Mi-sun stood in the largest construction facility ever built in human history, orbiting Jupiter's moon Titan. Around her, thousands of workers moved in organized chaos, building vessels that made Assembly observers deeply uncomfortable. The ships taking shape bore no resemblance to the elegant curves of galactic design. They were angular, brutal, and efficient. The Assembly keeps asking why we're building so many weapons, Mi-sun told her assistant, a young engineer named Dong-ho. They don't understand. These aren't just weapons. These are tools we've refined over thousands of years of killing each other. Dong-ho looked at the technical specifications for the new kinetic cannons. These can punch through any known shield system. That's the point. The Assembly builds shields to survive fights. We build weapons to win them. Mi-sun pulled up another design. This is a relativistic missile. It accelerates a tungsten rod to 0.9 light speed. The kinetic energy alone can crack a planet. Dong-ho searched for words. That's terrifying. That's human. Mi-sun approved the design with her handprint. The Assembly wonders why we never forgot how to fight. It's because we know that peace is temporary. Survival is permanent. Admiral Han-sol took command of the first expeditionary fleet from his flagship, a massive carrier called Indomitable. At 51, he was the youngest admiral in coalition history, promoted through combat rather than politics. He had fought in the Pacific Unification War, the last major conflict before Earth unified. He knew what war cost and he was willing to pay it. Status report, Han-sol said to his bridge crew. All ships reporting ready, Admiral, replied his tactical officer. 48 cruisers, 16 carriers, 237 support vessels. 80,000 personnel across the fleet. Han-sol studied the fleet composition on his tactical display. It was larger than the entire Assembly military. The Assembly had asked for assistance. Humanity had sent an invasion force. Captain Wu Jin commanded the cruiser Relentless. He had spent the last month training Assembly officers who volunteered to serve alongside human forces. Most couldn't finish the program. Human military doctrine was too harsh, too focused on overwhelming violence rather than measured response. One Assembly officer, a Keltharian named Velkor, had completed the training and now served as Wu Jin's liaison. Velkor sat on the bridge, his large eyes watching everything with visible stress. Your crew trains for boarding actions every day, Velkor observed. The Assembly rarely boards enemy vessels. That's because you disable them and wait, Wu Jin replied. We capture them and take everything useful. Information, technology, prisoners for intelligence. War isn't just about fighting, it's about learning your enemy faster than they learn you. But the casualties are acceptable if they achieve our objectives. Wu Jin pulled up tactical simulations. Look, your fleet engages here, tries to disable the enemy and hopes they surrender. Our fleet engages here, destroys primary targets and moves to the next objective before the enemy regroups. We don't wait for surrender. We create conditions where surrender is the only option. Velkor's skin patterns showed distress, but he nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand why the Assembly needed humans and why they feared them. Sergeant J. Young led a Marine company aboard the carrier Resolute. At 28, he was young for a sergeant, but the coalition promoted on performance, not age. His Marines trained in zero gravity, in hostile atmospheres, and simulated Dravok hive structures. They trained for every situation except retreat. The Assembly soldiers trained for peacekeeping, J. Young told his Marines during a briefing. They learned crowd control, diplomatic escorts, prisoner handling. We train for war. There's a difference. Peacekeepers try to make everyone survive. Soldiers try to make the enemy not survive. His Marines understood. They were volunteers from Earth's various military traditions. Some had family who fought in the Unification Wars. Others came from regions still rebuilding from those conflicts. They all knew that peace came from strength, not hope. Dr. Yoon Hai worked in a section of the fleet that even most crew members didn't know existed. psychological warfare. Her team developed weapons that the Assembly considered violations of sentient rights, neural disruptors that could break hive-mind communication, sonic weapons that caused panic, visual patterns that induced confusion in specific species. The Assembly thinks war is about destroying the enemy's ability to fight, Yun Hai explained to her team. That's part of it. But war is really about destroying the enemy's will to fight. If we can make the Dravok afraid, we've already won. Her assistant, a psychologist named Kyung-soo, reviewed their targeting protocols. The Dravok are a hive mind. They don't experience fear the way individuals do. No, Yun Hai agreed. But they do make calculations. Risk versus reward. If we make every engagement costly enough, the hive mind will calculate that fighting us isn't worth it. That's fear by mathematics. Ambassador Na-Yun faced challenges that no diplomat in human history had confronted. She was negotiating with 47 different species, each with their own concerns about humanity's growing military presence. Some assembly species saw humans as saviors. Others saw them as a new threat. You're building weapons that could destroy entire planets, accused a representative from the Vrex homeworld during a council session. How do we know you won't use them against us? Na-Yun stood calmly at the speaker's podium. You don't. You're trusting us because you have no choice. The Dravok are destroying your civilization. We're stopping them. After that, you'll have to decide if you're more afraid of what we might do or what the Dravok definitely will do. The blunt honesty shocked the chamber into silence. Assembly diplomacy was usually more careful, more indirect. Na-Yun continued. We didn't ask to be part of your war. You came to us. You asked for help. We're providing it. If you want gentle help, kind help, philosophical help, we're not your species. If you want effective help, we're your only option. High Chancellor Morthen watched the human military preparations with growing apprehension. He had asked for assistance. He was receiving an army that could conquer the galaxy. Observer Vrolix provided daily reports that read like warnings. Human production capacity exceeds all projections. Their shipyards produce more vessels in 1 month than most assembly worlds build in a year. Their weapons development continues at an accelerating pace. They are not preparing for the Dravok conflict alone. They are preparing for permanent military dominance. What do you suggest? Morthen asked him during a private meeting. I suggest we win this war quickly and then limit human military expansion before they decide they don't need our permission anymore. Morthen nodded slowly. And if they refuse limitations? Vrolix was silent. They both knew the answer. The Assembly had no way to enforce limitations on a species that had just outbuilt their entire military in 4 months. On Earth, Commander Tae-sung addressed the Coalition Command in a secret session. The Assembly expects us to reinforce their defensive positions. We're going to do something they can't imagine. We're going to attack. The command chamber showed a holographic map of Dravok-occupied space. Tae-sung highlighted multiple targets. The Assembly has been fighting defensively for 2 years. They hold positions and react to Dravok movements. We're going to reverse that. We strike their supply lines, their occupied worlds, their hive nodes. We make them defend everything at once. This will require deep penetration into enemy space, noted General Yun Hee. Head of Strategic Operations, yes, we'll be surrounded, outnumbered, and operating without support lines. That's where we're strongest. The Assembly fights carefully because they value every life. We fight efficiently because we value victory. Tae-sung zoomed in on a cluster of Dravok-occupied worlds. Here, this is where we hit first. Not because it's strategically valuable, because it's theirs. We're going to teach the Dravok that occupying territory has a cost. Admiral Han Sol reviewed the attack plans and approved them without hesitation. When do we launch? 2 weeks. The fleet needs final preparations. Make it 1 week, Han Sol said. Every day we wait is another day the Dravok consolidate. We move fast, we hit hard, we don't stop until they break. The first expeditionary fleet completed final preparations ahead of schedule. Every ship ran combat drills continuously. Every Marine practiced boarding actions. Every pilot flew attack simulations. The fleet wasn't just ready for war. It was eager for it. Dr. Ji-hai watched the preparations from her research station and felt a growing sense of dread. She understood the necessity of what humanity was doing. She also understood the consequences. Humanity was about to show the galaxy its true nature, and that nature was violent. We're going to win, she told Commander Tae-sung during a private conversation. I know we're going to win. That's what worries me. After we win, the galaxy will never see us the same way. We'll be the species that knows how to wage total war. Tae-sung didn't argue. Would you prefer we lose? The Dravok won't stop with the assembly. They watched humanity prepare for war and knew the stars would burn Part 4. The first expeditionary fleet emerged from FTL directly into Dravok-occupied space, and the galaxy learned what human warfare truly meant. Assembly Forward Base Tertius received emergency signals within seconds. Base Commander Corvell, an exhausted Vrexian who had been fighting a losing defensive action for 8 months, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The human fleet had bypassed the defensive positions entirely and jumped into enemy territory. They're insane, his tactical officer said. They're surrounded by Dravok forces on all sides. Corvell had fought the Dravok for months, losing ship after ship to their overwhelming numbers. He knew what happened to fleets that operated without support in Dravok space. They died. Get me a communication channel to the human commander. Admiral Han Sol appeared on the display, looking calm despite being surrounded by hostile forces. Commander Corvell, apologies for not coordinating with your defensive positions. We won't need them. Admiral, you're surrounded. The Dravok have over 300 vessels in your sector. You need to fall back to... We don't fall back, Han Sol interrupted. We came here to fight, watch, and learn. The first engagement happened 17 minutes after the human fleet arrived. A Dravok swarm fleet of 300 vessels moved to intercept, expecting the humans to adopt defensive formations like the assembly always did. The Dravok had fought the assembly for 2 years and learned their patterns. Tight formations, careful positioning, weapons that disabled rather than destroyed. Captain Wu Jin commanded the forward cruiser group, 12 heavy vessels loaded with enough firepower to level a city. His tactical display showed the Dravok approaching in their standard swarm pattern, surrounding their target from all angles. They think we're going to defend, Wu Jin told his crew. Show them different. All ships attack formation Delta, full acceleration into their center mass. The human cruisers accelerated directly toward the Dravok swarm. No evasion, no careful positioning. Just pure aggressive momentum. Velcor, the Keltharian observer on Wu Jin's bridge, made a sound of distress. You're flying directly into their concentrated fire, Velcor said. Yes. Because they're not expecting it. They're positioned to surround a defensive target. They're not ready for a target that attacks them. The human cruisers hit the Dravok formation like hammers. Kinetic weapons fired at point-blank range, punching through Dravok shields and hulls with devastating efficiency. Human missiles didn't disable. They obliterated. In the first 90 seconds of combat, the humans destroyed 47 Dravok vessels. The Dravok swarm, controlled by their hive mind, tried to adapt. They concentrated fire on the human ships. Human shields flickered and failed under the assault. 2 cruisers took critical damage, but they didn't retreat. They kept firing until their ammunition was gone, then rammed the nearest Dravok vessels. 7 minutes into the engagement, the Dravok fleet broke formation and scattered. They had never encountered an enemy willing to trade casualties. The hive mind calculated the cost of continuing the battle and decided retreat was more efficient than total loss. Captain Wu Jin watched the Dravok flee and allowed himself a small smile. That's the difference. The assembly fights to minimize losses. We fight to win, whatever the cost. Send damage reports to the Admiral. Across the fleet, similar engagements played out. Human vessels sought combat rather than avoiding it. They used tactics the Dravok had never seen because the assembly had never used them. Ramming attacks, suicide runs, weapons that killed everyone in the target zone, including the attackers. Dr. Yunhai's psychological warfare division activated their neural disruption systems. The technology targeted the quantum entanglement that the Dravok hive mind used for communication. Individual Dravok suddenly found themselves cut off from the collective consciousness. They panicked, their vessels drifting without coordination. The hive mind is fracturing in combat zones, Yunhai reported to Admiral Han Sol. Individual nodes are losing connection. We're creating chaos in their command structure. Excellent. Maintain disruption on all active combat zones. Make them fight as individuals, not as a swarm. Commander Sun Ji, The 33-year-old intelligence officer worked from her station deep in the flagship. She had spent weeks breaking Dravok communication protocols. Now she put that knowledge to use, injecting false commands into their network. Dravok vessels received orders to attack their own forces. Hive nodes got contradictory instructions. Supply convoys were redirected to empty space. The hive mind, which had been the Dravok's greatest strength, became a vulnerability that humans exploited ruthlessly. Sergeant J. Young led the first ground assault on a Dravok-occupied world. The planet had been an assembly colony until 6 months ago. 4 million civilians had been consumed by the Dravok swarm. Now it was a hive node, a biological facility where the Dravok consciousness resided in massive organic structures. The assembly had tried to retake the planet once. They had attempted precision strikes on military targets while preserving civilian infrastructure. They failed because the Dravok didn't care about infrastructure. They cared about biomass. Human Marines didn't try precision strikes. They deployed from orbit in armored drop pods, landing directly on top of the hive nodes. J. Young's company hit the surface under heavy fire, their armor absorbing damage that would have killed assembly soldiers instantly. Move fast, hit hard, no mercy, J. Young ordered over the tactical net. These things ate 4 million people. We're returning the favor. The Marines fought through Dravok warrior forms, creatures bred specifically for combat. Human weapons tore through them with industrial efficiency. Flamethrowers cleared corridors. Explosives collapsed hive structures. It wasn't elegant, it was effective. Deep in the hive, J. Young's team found the central node, a massive biological computer that coordinated the local swarm. The assembly's rules of engagement would have required offering terms of surrender. Human rules were simpler. Burn it, J. Young ordered. The hive node died in fire and explosives. Across the planet, Dravok forces suddenly lost coordination. They fought as confused individuals rather than a unified force. The human Marines cut through them systematically, clearing the planet sector by sector. Engineer Mi-sun watched the battle data and continuously adapted. When Dravok shields adapted to kinetic weapons, she designed energy weapons. When they countered missiles, she developed direct-fire plasma systems. The humans were innovating, in real time, treating warfare as an engineering problem to be solved. The assembly spent 2 years fighting the same way, Mi-sun told her design team. They let the Dravok learn their tactics. We change our approach every engagement. Keep them guessing, keep them adapting, make them react to us instead of the other way around. Colonel Young Tae led Special Forces operations deep behind Dravok lines. His teams infiltrated occupied worlds, identified critical infrastructure, and destroyed it. They operated without support, without reinforcements, and without mercy. When captured, they took suicide pills rather than risk being absorbed into the hive. War wasn't just combat, it was commitment. Assembly observers watched the human campaign with growing horror. Base Commander Corvell sent reports to Assembly Central that read like nightmare descriptions. Human forces show no regard for their own casualties. They treat soldiers as expendable resources in service of victory. They use weapons that kill indiscriminately. They target enemy command structures with prejudice. By assembly standards, every engagement is a war crime. By effectiveness standards, they're winning a war we've been losing for 2 years. High Chancellor Morthen read the reports in his office on Assembly Central Station. He had asked for human help. He was receiving a demonstration of total war. How many worlds have they retaken? 17 in 3 months, Chancellor. The Dravok are retreating across the entire sector. And our casualties? Minimal. Human forces absorb all combat losses. They don't ask for support, reinforcements, or assistance. They just fight. Morthen looked at casualty reports. The humans were losing people. Not many compared to the scale of the campaign, but still, every week brought more dead. Yet the fleet never paused, never slowed, never requested time to recover. They just kept pushing forward. Observer Vralix compiled a detailed analysis titled Human Warfare, a Study in Controlled Brutality. He wrote, "The humans do not fight to defeat the enemy. They fight to eliminate the enemy. Every engagement is prosecuted with maximum violence. They employ weapon systems that we consider barbaric. They accept casualty ratios that we would find unacceptable. Yet they're winning. We asked for protection. We received predators. Dr. Ji Hai, still monitoring from the research station, tried to understand the human campaign objectively. Yes, it was brutal. Yes, it violated assembly conventions on warfare. But it was also ending a war that threatened galactic civilization. She recorded her thoughts. The assembly wanted humanity to fight like them, just better. They're discovering we don't fight like them at all. We fight to win, and we've had thousands of years to perfect the art of victory through violence. The campaign accelerated. Admiral Han Sol didn't give the Dravok time to adapt. Every victory led immediately to the next attack. No pause, no consolidation. They watched humanity prepare for war, and knew the stars would burn. Part 5. 6 months after the Battle of Burning Stars, the Galactic Assembly convened to address what they carefully called the human question. The Great Chamber on Assembly Central Station held representatives from all 47 member species. In the center seats, where candidate species once waited nervously for acceptance, sat Ambassador Nayun. But she wasn't a candidate anymore. She represented a full member species with military veto power and equal voting rights. The desperate agreement signed during wartime was now permanent reality. High Chancellor Morthan opened the session with careful words. The Assembly owes humanity a debt that cannot be measured. The Dravok threat has been neutralized. 12 billion lives have been avenged. Peace has been restored. He paused, his forearms spreading in a gesture of acknowledgement. However, we must now discuss the methods by which this victory was achieved and what they mean for our future. Several species immediately requested to speak. A Neruvian representative stood first. Humanity employed weapons that we consider violations of sentient rights. Neural disruption technology, indiscriminate area weapons, deliberate targeting of command nodes. By assembly conventions, these are war crimes. Ambassador Nayun rose calmly. She wore formal diplomatic attire. But everyone in the chamber knew she had spent the last 9 months coordinating a military campaign that killed millions. Representative, I need to ask, would you prefer the Dravok had won? Because your conventions were losing the war. Your civilized approach was getting your people consumed by a hive mind that didn't care about your rules. That doesn't justify, it justifies survival. Nayun interrupted. You asked us to save you, we did. Now you want to judge us for being good at it. That's fine, judge us. But understand that every judgment you pass is possible because we were willing to do what you wouldn't. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species supported Nayun's position, others condemned it. But underneath the arguments, everyone understood the fundamental shift that had occurred. The galaxy's most powerful military force was now a species that had joined the galactic community less than 2 years ago. Commander Tae Sung sat in the Coalition High Command Center on Earth, monitoring the assembly debate through live feeds. Around him, military analysts processed data from the Dravok campaign, learning lessons that would shape human doctrine for generations. The Assembly is considering restrictions on human military development, reported one analyst. Tae Sung smiled without humor. They're welcome to try. What are they going to do? Fight us? Admiral Han Sol entered the command center, back from the Kelnis sector where human forces still maintained peacekeeping operations. At 51, he looked older now, the weight of 9 months of continuous combat showing in his face. The Assembly wants us to decommission half our fleet. They say it's excessive for peacetime needs. What did you tell them? Tae Sung asked. I told them that humanity determines its own defense needs. They can request. They can't demand. Han Sol pulled up strategic maps. We won the war for them. That doesn't make us their servants. Dr. Ji Hai published her controversial paper, The Predator's Gift, 2 months after the war ended. It became the most read document in galactic history, translated into every known language. She argued that humanity's capacity for organized violence, refined through thousands of years of warfare, was exactly what the galaxy needed. The Assembly spent 10 millennia trying to evolve beyond conflict, she wrote. That's admirable. But evolution is a process of adaptation to environment. The Assembly evolved for a galaxy without existential threats. When such a threat appeared, their evolution became a liability. Humanity never had the luxury of evolving beyond violence. We had to become very good at it just to survive. The galaxy calls us predators, we are, but predators can be protectors. The question is whether the assembly wants us to be both. The paper sparked intense debate. Some called it justification for barbarism. Others called it honest assessment of reality. On Earth, it became required reading at coalition military academies. Captain Wu Jin was assigned to establish the first permanent human military academy on Assembly Central Station. His mission was to train assembly officers in human tactics. The first class had 23 students from 7 different species. By the end of the first week, 9 had quit. "Your training is too aggressive," complained a Vrexian student. "You teach us to accept casualties, to prioritize mission success over survival. This goes against everything the assembly believes." Wu Jin stood before the remaining students. "You're right, it does. The assembly believes that every life is precious and should be preserved. Humanity believes the same thing. The difference is what we're willing to do to preserve those lives. Sometimes you have to risk your life to save others. Sometimes you have to take lives to stop worse deaths. If you can't accept that, you shouldn't be here." 5 more students quit that day. The remaining 9 stayed and learned tactics that would change assembly military doctrine forever. Engineer Mi Sun faced ethics investigations from both human and assembly committees. Her weapons designs had ended the war, but violated numerous conventions on acceptable military technology. She sat before the investigative panel without apology. "You created weapons designed specifically to kill rather than disable," said one assembly investigator. "This contradicts the principle of proportional force." "Proportional to what?" Mi Sun asked. "The Dravok were consuming entire populations. They were committing genocide at an industrial scale. My weapons ended that. If stopping genocide requires disproportionate force, I'm comfortable with that. These weapons could be used against civilian populations. So could knives. So could farming equipment. So could bare hands if you're committed enough. The weapon isn't the problem. The intent is, and our intent was stopping a species that was eating the galaxy." Mi Sun leaned forward. "You want me to apologize for being effective? I won't. You want me to promise I'll never build such weapons again? I can't, because the next threat might require them. What I will promise is this: humanity will never use these weapons except against existential threats." "Is that good enough?" The investigation concluded without formal charges. Mi Sun's weapons were classified at the highest levels, archived but not destroyed. The galaxy hoped they would never be needed again, but now they knew such weapons existed. Sergeant Jae Young returned to Earth after 9 months of combat. He and his surviving Marines were celebrated as heroes. Parades were held. Medals were awarded. But Jae Young found himself uncomfortable with the celebration. He had done terrible things to terrible enemies. That was necessary. But it wasn't glorious. A reporter asked him what the war had been like. Jae Young thought carefully before answering. "It was necessary. That's all I can say. We did what needed doing. Don't celebrate that. Learn from it. Learn that peace is worth protecting. Learn that sometimes protection requires violence. Learn that violence has costs that medals don't erase." The interview became famous. A reminder that victory wasn't clean and heroes weren't always happy. Observer Vralix was promoted to head the new Bureau of Human Affairs, a department created specifically to monitor and coordinate with Earth. His office on Assembly Central Station overlooked the docking bays where human military vessels maintained permanent presence. He filed his final report on the Dravok War with careful words. "Humanity didn't save the Assembly by being better than the Dravok. They saved us by being willing to be worse. They matched brutality with greater brutality. They responded to total war with more total war. This is not a criticism. This is an observation. The Assembly wanted salvation without moral compromise. Humanity provided salvation by making the moral compromise for us. We asked them to be monsters on our behalf. They agreed. Now we must decide if we're grateful or afraid. I suspect we'll be both for a very long time." On Earth, public opinion divided sharply. Some viewed the galactic community as an opportunity for expansion, trade, and cultural exchange. Others saw it as a trap that would draw humanity into eternal conflict. Political movements formed around both perspectives. Ambassador Nayun addressed the United Earth Council during a special session. "The galaxy is afraid of us now. Some of you think that's bad. I think it's necessary. Fear is what prevents aggression. The Dravok weren't afraid of the Assembly, so they attacked. Every species in the galaxy is now afraid of humanity. That fear will keep them from attacking Earth. That fear will make them think twice before starting conflicts that might draw us in. Fear isn't friendship, but it's stability. At what cost? Asked a counselor. We've become the galaxy's military power. Doesn't that make us responsible for every conflict? No, Nayun replied firmly. It makes us responsible for choosing which conflicts deserve our involvement. The Assembly had that responsibility for 10,000 years. They tried to be everyone's mediator. We'll be different. We'll be the species that only fights when necessary. But when we do fight, we'll fight to win. Dr. Yun Hai's Psychological Warfare Division was disbanded after the war. But her RECE, the Assembly demanded it be destroyed. The Coalition refused. The compromise was that the research would be sealed and only accessed in the event of another existential threat.